Yesterday, we updated you about the latest pretrial hearings in the case of Bradley Manning. Now, what the defense argued yesterday at Fort Meade was that the entire case should be dismissed because of a flawed discovery process in which the prosecution didn't give up a whole lot of information. Now, the information at hand were assessment reports written by the CIA, the Pentagon, the State Department, and possibly even other agencies. Now, those so-called WikiLeaks Task Force, or WTF reports, are expected to show that the government privately admits that the leaks have not harmed national security. But what happened instead was a bit of a mixed bag for the Manning defense team. See, Army Judge Denise Lind yesterday ordered the prosecution to turn over those reports, detailing the alleged damage that the leaked documents have caused to national security. So that could help the Manning team. They argue that aiding the enemy, that charge being brought against them, should be dropped, as their client neither intended to nor actually did assist the enemy, as no harm was done to national security. And the prosecution today said that they're going to try to prove that Manning knew al-Qaeda members visited WikiLeaks prior to his disclosure. And if they can manage to get inside Manning's head and do that, then he could be found guilty, even if the damage assessments don't reveal any harm. But again, just remember how ridiculous all of this is. Because you place something on the internet, you can be charged with aiding the enemy. Newsflash, al-Qaeda doesn't only read WikiLeaks, so any news story, anything online, any book out there like Bob Woodward's Obama's Wars, which gives you an inside look, could be classified in the same way. But anyway, back to the details from today's hearing. Now, because the reports are still classified, Lind is going to determine behind closed doors if they must be given to the defense. Appropriate for a trial shrouded in secrecy, right? But even if Lind refuses to allow the defense access to these reports, that decision to even ask for the documents might be seen as sort of a setback for Manning, because that means that now a judge has seen the documents, and that means that their arguments for getting the whole case dismissed because the documents haven't been shown to anybody fall flat. And so today, Lind ruled that the trial will proceed, but it remains to be seen whether or not she's actually going to allow the defense to take into account those reports. Which perhaps isn't really a shock, right? The Obama administration's war on whistleblowers is so pervasive that it's almost become a cliche. What I still manage to find absurd, though, is the inconsistency. When certain national security officials, for example, shed light on government abuse by leaking to reporters, people like John Kiriakou, they get charged with the most serious of crimes. But how about when the exact opposite happens? How about when a government official destroys evidence of government abuse in obstruction of justice and then writes a book about it? Take the case of former CIA head of clandestine services, Jose Rodriguez. In 2005, he destroyed videotapes showing the CIA torturing 2 detainees. That's evidence that a federal judge ordered the agency to turn over. So you want to know what happened to him? Well, in 2010, we had Chris Anders, ACLU's senior counsel, on to discuss this story and explain the Obama administration's looking forward policy in action.
There is no reason why there shouldn't have been a prosecution brought based on the destruction of these videotapes. There were federal courts that multiple times told the government, the Bush administration, that they had to preserve all the records dealing with the torture issue. It really means that the world will never have a full depiction and a full understanding of what it was that the United States was engaged in terms of torture. There's an abundant evidence that these were decisions that were being made at the very highest levels of government, decisions being made at the White House.
That's right. It could have potentially been crucial to building a case against former President Bush or against Jose Rodriguez, for that matter. Yet President Obama, despite all the talk of hopey changey stuff, let him go free as a bird. And that's not all. Now Rodriguez is set to profit off of his misdeeds. He will be releasing a book called Hard Measures, and that's going to detail his involvement in the CIA's torture program and the subsequent cover-up. So Rodriguez brazenly admits to destroying the tapes, even brags that the CIA's torture program and his cover-up saved lives. But while he openly brags about his obstruction of justice, the agency seems to have no problem with the book. Which brings us back to this whole inconsistency issue. The agency does go after others who publish criticism of its torture program or were sources for such material, people like John Kiriakou, people like James Risen. They are treated as enemies of the state, like Bradley Manning. But the CIA doesn't take exception to Rodriguez's book because it makes obscene defense spending and unaccountable programs look necessary. Oh, and it also helps keep American voters paralyzed with fear. Whistleblowers, on the other hand, they do not threaten lives. They merely threaten the doctrine of never-ending war and the national security state.